What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to the ARC Junkies Podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. In today's episode, I'm talking with Sara Gardner, a welder turned welding engineer, certified welding inspector, certified welding educator, and a part-time welding instructor. Sara started welding back in high school and developed a passion for this trade. While working as a welder, she decided to pursue a degree in welding engineering at Ferris State. It just goes to show you that welding can take you on a journey you may never considered. All it takes is one little spark to light an entire career. We'll get right into today's episode after a quick word from our supporters. Today's episode of the ARC Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Fronius USA. Fronius is thrilled to announce 2 new welding products to unleash your welding potential. First up is the Fronius Dual Wire Feeder. The new WF25i gives welders the freedom to have 2 torches ready to go, each with different wire types or sizes, different welding parameters, and easily switchable at the touch of a button. No need to change wire spools or consumables between applications. Get precise wire feeding and save time without adding complexity to your day. Next is the mobile fume extraction system, Exento. The Exento comes in both high vac and low vac versions to fit your specific welding needs. The low vac system includes a flexible extraction arm with 360-degree rotation and a flow-optimized hood for exceptional fume capture rate. The high vac system combines perfectly with the Exento torch kits to remove more than 99.9% of captured fume particulates at the arc to provide excellent extraction in a compact unit. Come experience both product lines at FabTech this September in Chicago. While at the booth, be sure to stick around for daily welding machine giveaways, guest appearances, welding presentations, and of course the opportunity to weld on-site with a wide range of Fronius products. We're also brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. Rockmount makes the rods and wires you've always needed but never knew existed, like Neptune MIG for welding aluminum sheets, extrusions, pipe, and casting. Neptune MIG delivers top-quality welds with great bead appearance and boasts 40,000 pounds of tensile strength. And unlike other types of filler metal for aluminum, it can be anodized post-welding. Neptune MIG is suitable for a wide range of aluminum alloys and is designed to produce superior results with minimal skills. This product is particularly excellent for ship superstructures, cargo tanks, truck frames, bodies, lights, furniture, and any other aluminum you encounter in the shop or out in the field. Check out Neptune MIG today, along with many other amazing rods and wires Rockmount has to help you weld stronger so your repairs can last longer. And right now, you can get a free 1-pound tube of Tartan AAA when you spend $250 or more at rockmountwelding.com and use code word AJP in the discount box at checkout. Get the job done right the first time, every time with Rockmount. We're also brought to you by Outlaw Leather, your one-stop shop for all things welding. Outlaw carries a wide range of everything you need as a welder. Hit up their website, outlawleather.com, and get tooled up with fast, easy shipping right to your door. Outlaw carries all the names you know and trust like CK Worldwide, Bomber, FlameTech, Sawyer, and more. Outlaw can also build any custom leather work you want to include hoods, arm pads, bolt bags, scabbards, and more. Outlaw carries a full line of exotic leathers as well to include Cayman, Stingray, and Elephant. Just reach out to info@outlawleatherllc.com and send them a description or a sketch of what you're looking for. They can put any logo or design on your leather welding gear. And right now, listeners of the ARC Junkies podcast can save 15% off on all in-stock leather goods when you use ARC Junkies in the discount box at checkout. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Thank you for downloading show number 289 of the ARC Junkies podcast.
You're listening to the ARC Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, Sara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we got to kind of link up on LinkedIn. I mean, that's what it's all about for industry professionals and stuff. But so you're a welding engineer, but you started off as a welder.
Yep. So I basically got into welding in high school. I never really even thought of it as a career path or getting into welding. I didn't really know it was a thing that you could go out and do, and it was a very rewarding career. So we had like a trial, go to your local career tech center day in high school. And of course I signed up for it because I got to get out of school for a half a day, which in high school I was all for that. I went and looked at criminal justice because I was like, CSI is cool. And then sat through, an hour and a half presentation. They're like, well, this is the hardest program here to pass. So if you're not serious about it, then you don't really want to sign up for it. And then the second thing that I went there to look at was welding because I was like, I've never tried this before, it'd be something cool. Grew up on a little hobby farm. So I was like, worst case, I know how to fix stuff and, get to try something that I've never done before. And yeah, from there, I signed up for their weld program. I was in there for 2 years through high school, got out into the workforce, started as a welder fabricator, making oven systems. So did that and really just decided, like, I kind of knew right away getting out of high school that I wanted to learn more about welding. I really felt like I just barely scratched the surface with it. And Ferris State University up in Big Rapids is like 45 minutes away from where I grew up. So I was like, that couldn't be more perfect. And ended up there for 5 years and went through their weld engineering program there.
So how long had you been welding from the time you got into high school to the time you got out to you made the decision to become a welding engineer?
Really, I started welding straight out of high school, and I still, I got signed up for college in high school, had a year of gen eds, and then got right into their weld program. But throughout my time in school, I was working as a welder and getting that experience, being a fabricator. And then I had a production welding job, making automotive paint tooling racks and building fixtures and kind of doing everything on the shop from forming parts to welding to fixture building, running lasers. So really getting that hands-on piece is kind of what really pushed me to want to go through school, but also wanting to learn more about that is really what pushed me to that. I kind of went right from high school into college, but still had that work experience the whole time I was going to school. So
were you a pretty good student while you were in high school and kind of knew you wanted to get into college and do something, just didn't know it was welding until you got into the welding program?
I was a reasonable student. High school, I got a little less dedicated to school than, what I was in middle school and stuff like that. So getting into college was definitely a very big adjustment. And I never really planned on going to college. In high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I just decided that welding was something that I enjoyed and I could see building a career out of it, and wanting to learn more about it just kind of pushed me towards that.
Now, how do they run the program up at Ferris? Is there any hands-on that you do? Do they actually put you in a lab and let you do welding, or is it just strictly, book work and statics class and trig and all that, what people think a typical college class kind of entails?
Yeah, so it's your normal degree classes. You have to go through, X amount of English classes and math classes to meet university requirements. But your whole first 2 years at Ferris, you're in a lab for half the day. You're, running gas metal arc, all your basic weld processes. You get to play around with submerged arc welding, get into a little bit of automation and some programming. So you spend a good majority of your time the first 2 years there for their associates program in a lab, trialing these different processes and really getting that hands-on learning.
Okay.
So that was a big draw for me there, just because I've never been one to, want to have a job where I'm sitting behind a desk all day. And
yeah, that sitting in a cubicle sucks. I did that for a while. It's no fun. And that's kind of why, I went through a construction management degree. And then I realized halfway through it, I was like, this job, this career, this degree is leading me directly into a cubicle, which I'm trying to avoid. That's why I picked construction. But no, you're going to stuff me in a cubicle and have me do, scheduling and budgeting for years before I ever get back to the job site. And I was like, no, that's not for me. I was looking into attending Ferris State because the more I got into welding, at that point I was a welding instructor. And I was like, well, it'd probably be better to get a degree that kind of aligned with what I'm doing now, which is teaching welding. And I looked into Ferris State, but they didn't have any online courses. At the time, it was 100% you had to be there. And I was like, well, I can't pack up my wife and kids and be like, come on, we're heading up to Michigan. Daddy's going to college up there. So it just didn't work because I was like, I've already got the hands-on experience. Maybe I could just take the online classes and, get, tested down here or get some weld certs or something to show proficiency in the actual processes. But it just wasn't going to work out for me.
Yeah, and Ferris is definitely like, they're all still really, even with like post-COVID and everything, they're still fully in a lab. I mean, it's a mix of hands-on and laboratory, but almost all your classes there are combination classes, like even getting into metallurgy and stuff like that. Even physics had a combination lecture lab. So,
oh, nice. So yeah. How much of the stuff that you learned when you were at Ferris that you kind of already learned in high school? I mean, was the stuff you were learning in high school, just because a lot of high school programs, I mean, they're not the best when it comes to as far like welding fundamentals and the technical information. How much of that actually transferred, and how much of that did you kind of have to brain dump because it wasn't taught correctly?
So I got really lucky in high school. I actually had a fantastic instructor, and they did a really great job just going over your general basic processes, giving you a good fundamental understanding of the process and what you're doing and welding in different positions, and actually doing like fabrication and building projects and not just welding on coupons. So they did a really great job of kind of preparing me for that. I will say when I got to college, it was still a really big learning curve, and just the amount of information that I had to take in, and still being able to do the work in lab, but also learning a lot more of the technical background and more of the advanced stuff that you don't really see when you're just learning how to weld. You're learning the why behind the weld, and why, when you adjust certain settings, what it happens to a weld, and doing all the troubleshooting and stuff like that. So that was probably the biggest adjustment and learning curve, and seeing processes that I hadn't seen at high school, because, most high school vocational centers have limited funding and limited resources. So you get some equipment, but
yeah, you don't have access to everything you need. I think it's really cool that they did. You got to weld, like in high school, you get to weld on the different coupons and stuff like that, go through the different processes, but your instructor also incorporated like project-based learning. You said you got to fabricate. There's so many schools out there that do not teach fabrication. And I think it's kind of a disservice, because nobody really needs to hire somebody that can just weld 6-inch long coupons or 6-inch long welds in flat, horizontal, vertical, and overhead. They need you to be able to take a set of blueprints, prep your material, cut all your material, do a bill of material, develop a cut list, and then assemble, get everything fit up and tacked and all that stuff. And you get so many people that are coming out of trade school or a welding program, and they can't do the basic functions of the job other than weld. So they're kind of lost. They walk in there and they're like, all right, what needs welded? Nothing, buddy. I need you to go over there and cut out all these I-beams to length and, cut these different angles on all this square tube and angle iron. And they're completely lost because they've never run a rolling saw. They've never run a protractor. They don't know how to find angles. It's kind of a disservice. And I think more and more instructors nowadays, because you got a lot of younger instructors getting into it, and they understand what needs to take place, what students really need to learn to prepare for the workforce. A lot more of them are incorporating the project-based learning.
Yeah, I agree. That's huge. Like my previous job, I had a hybrid role of weld engineer and weld trainer, and we would get all sorts of people coming in there. Like when I started, we were looking for people with at least, 2 years of experience. You had to pass a basic weld test, which was, some 12-inch long coupons. You had to tack up a lap T corner joint combo, lay it out using a print, be able to hit those dimensions and tolerance with a tape measure, and have a basic understanding of weld symbols. And when I kind of started doing that, it really astonished me the amount of people that couldn't pass that or didn't have that basic knowledge. They could weld, but they were kind of missing some of those pieces. So we ended up doing pretty much all of our training was on the job training. Like there's a mix of paperwork, learning ISO and learning the way the company did all of their paperwork and getting an understanding of being an employee at the company and what your role was, but also taking and developing, the other half of the day, we're out on the floor, we're welding parts, we're going over blueprints together, learning weld symbols together. And that was a huge gap that we really seen, being in the workforce and working with these people. Because obviously, the job market and just what's been happening lately, it's been a lot harder to find good qualified candidates and people that can come in that have all that base knowledge right off the get-go. So it really developed into, if you have basic weld skill, we're going to teach you the rest of it, and we're going to help you work up and build those skills and be working on running parts and really get to the point of being a production welder where you can kind of be on your own and run pretty much anything that comes into your booth.
Yeah. I think that's kind of cool that your company actually designated you as a trainer or had a training program set up for new hires. Most of the companies, especially down here, they don't have that. And the funny thing is, I go in, especially when I was a welding instructor, I'd walk into these different shops and talk to the so-called, weld supervisor, air quotes, and they had no clue about welding. They just managed the welders. And it's like, well, how do you manage a group of people when you don't understand exactly what they're doing? If you can't, you don't even speak their language. Volts, amps, wire feed, speed. How do you communicate with your people other than, like, here's a set of blueprints, get this done, and they're like, I'm just going to sit back and watch you do it. Like, you would think that the supervisor would have some idea of what it actually takes to fabricate and develop the parts, pieces, whatever they're assembling.
Yeah, and that really their training program, they started that like 10 years ago because they had really good qualified people coming in, but they just weren't setting people up for success. So they were basically a high mix, low volume contract manufacturer. So we ran everything from hydraulic tanks to greenhouse racks to medical equipment to furniture. Like, it was all over the place. You could be welding some 7/8 inch thick plate that's going into an engine mount, or welding a 20 gauge filing cabinet, as two jobs you're doing in one day. So they weren't really setting people up for success. So the training program was something they developed to really help fill that skilled labor gap. And honestly, that was a huge thing, because as long as I've been in the industry, I haven't seen companies that are willing to do that. And, they'll send people to school and send them to classes, but giving them that hands-on learning, and not only having somebody who understands welding, but having someone who's been a welder, but also has that engineering background and understands the why behind welding. Because that's really when all of that clicked for me, like getting good with troubleshooting welds and being able to explain it and teach people that really had no background in welding. Like, we've had people that have been some of our most successful operators there that came in and they'd never ran a robot, they'd never welded, and 6 months, a year later, they're programming robots, they're developing weld schedules and doing all those things because that environment was created to let them be able to learn that and really grow into those roles.
Yeah. And you see a lot, have you seen it a lot in industry when you hire somebody, you bring them in, they're kind of like a one-trick pony. They can only do like one process or weld on one thickness of material. Because you were saying, like, you'll go from 7/8 to, like down to 20 gauge. And, a lot of people aren't proficient with that.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've seen a lot, depending. Every company does such dramatically different things, and every industry you're dealing with so many different processes and welding positions. And, some industries do code work, and some industries you just go in there and adjust your knobs on your machine however you want to adjust them. And that's all there is to it. So it's really like, I've had welders that have come in for a weld test and they're like, oh yeah, I've been welding for 30 years. Completely failed my weld test, but they're like, oh, I've been welding, round tubing. So, I go find something out of the scrap bin, tack that up for them so they can weld that. And they weld it like it's nobody's business, but that's all they've done and all they've specialized in.
That's all they can do.
Yeah, definitely something I've run into a lot. And like, the best piece of advice I can give to anybody that's young in the industry or really just has that one skill set, like, I made it a point to get jobs where I was constantly expanding my skill set and working as a fabricator, then working as a production welder, and doing these different positions, then getting into engineering and automotive, and making sure that I had that variety of experience to be able to hop into a booth and weld anything that shows up in front of me, as well as just having the ability, I guess, to be able to do more than one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Being diversified in this field is key. being able to do a little bit of everything. You know, what do they say? Jack of all trades, master of none. It's really good to be able to go from one process to the next. I was telling one of the students today that, you know, I had in my my week-long training program, some of my students used to get mad at me because I had the ability to go from one booth to the next. You know, like the last 6 weeks of the program, everybody's kind of working on a different process, gearing up for whatever industry that they're going to enter. But they all had proficiencies in, you know, stick, MIG, TIG, flux core, all the different positions, different alloys. But I could go from one booth to the next. You know, this student A is over here doing like thin gauge stainless. So I'd walk in there and help get them dialed in. You know, the next booth might be working on 3/8 stick welding or, you know, overhead or 3G. You know, the next student might be working aluminum spool gun. Like everybody's doing something different, and I can go booth to booth and kind of get them all dialed in and get them on the right track. And it used to upset the students because they'd have such a hard problem or such a hard time mastering one proficiency. They're like, how can you just go from one place to the next? And it's like, I've been doing it for 20, 25 years, but, you know, you've got to become diversified. You can't just stick to one process and kind of rest on that and hope that's going to take you, you know, through the rest of your career, because you might be a really good MIG welder, you know, right out of the gate. But let's say you come graduation day, nobody's hiring for MIG welding. Well, guess what? You can get into a stick welding job, you can get into a TIG welding job, and you can do that until, you know, the perfect job lands in your lap, or, you know, there's availability at the company you want to go work for. But this is going to get you by during the times that, you know, there's no work for MIG welding. Or if you get into, you know, a job shop, you can't just run stick all day in a job shop or MIG all day in a job shop. Everything's going to vary. You know, you're going to be working on different alloys, different thicknesses, you know, so like dig deep into this and kind of learn everything you can about every process.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a huge thing. And I always stress that, you know, to people that are getting into the industry. So I was doing that engineering training role. I just recently started a job back in automotive, getting back into weld engineering. But I teach college classes part-time, so I'm an adjunct at our local community college. So working with students there, really, I teach like a basic welding class. I've done TIG welding classes there too, but I do a basic welding class. And most of those people are there for apprenticeships because they're going to be in a maintenance program or they're getting into an electrical program and they've never been around welding before. It's not anything that they see or anything that they've done, and being able to kind of hone and develop those skills. You know, it's a 15-week class and you're cramming in oxyacetylene welding and cutting and MIG welding and TIG welding and stick welding, and you're cramming that all into a really short class and just trying to get them as much exposure as possible. And I definitely ran into that where, you know, students are frustrated. They're like, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. And, you know, seeing me be able to do that, it's like, again, I've been in this industry for 10 years. I've spent my whole career being around all these different processes and getting that experience. And you don't, I mean, granted, there are some people that do, but you don't just start out as a great welder that knows all these different things and has that ability to kind of be a jack of all trades. Like, you start with that basic knowledge and you build it from there. But what you pick as a career, or what, you know, training programs you get into, or what knowledge you kind of acquire, knowing what you want to use that for when you get into the field, or jobs that you're looking at, that's what really builds you into the welder that you're going to be, because it doesn't just happen overnight.
Right. I like the fact that you mentioned earlier you wanted to understand the why. And that's always been like my driving force. You know, like, I want to understand how things work. And I think that's one of the things that kind of pulled me in deeper into welding, because prior to getting into welding education, like, I could weld. It wasn't a big deal, but I didn't like go home, eat, sleep, think, and breathe welding. Once I got into it, and it's like, okay, I really need to know my stuff. Not only do I have to be able to talk about it, but I have to be able to do it. And then I have to be able to correct when it's not going right, you know, with these students. And that's when I started taking the deep dive, and that's what pulled me further and further down the rabbit hole. And that's why I love welding so much. There's just so much to learn about it. You'll never understand or know everything about welding, but it's like every day I get a little bit better. Every day I learn something new about welding, whether I'm teaching it or I'm doing it myself or I'm doing the research or I'm talking to somebody. every day there's just like another little nugget that I can put in my toolbox and bust that out at a later date.
Yeah, and really that like is one thing that really drew me into this, because again, I started wanting to learn more about welding. Like I didn't, I wasn't in high school like I'm going to go be an engineer someday and that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I just knew that I wanted to be able to learn more about something that I really enjoyed, and all the different avenues that can take you down. And even today, I've had a good variety of jobs in different industries working on different products, and I still learn new stuff every day. It's never just everything and you're done learning. Like it's always a continued learning experience based on what you're exposing yourself to and the people that you network with. Like a lot of my classmates from college or just people that I've run into in the industry, there are people that are better at certain things than others, and being able to network and talk with people and, have those people that you can talk to if they specialize in something more than you, and having those resources, that's been really, really helpful just to be able to build my knowledge base. And the more and the more people that you can talk to, it just really makes you more well-rounded.
Oh, 100%. I mean, networking in this industry is huge. It's a very small industry, but I mean, it's rather vast, but it's a very small industry. It seems like a lot of the people that I meet know some of the other people that I know. So it's very cool. It's a very tight-knit community, and that's kind of what I tell my students when they were graduating the program. I was like, don't burn any bridges. Yeah, it sucks. You got to put in, 2 weeks notice when you leave somewhere, because somebody could just walk in and fire you one day for no reason. But don't burn any bridges, because you're going to go off to another company and they probably, they all know each other. I've been doing weld certifications for the past year now out here in Central Florida, and I go into different shops and I see, some of the workers that were at another shop, they're at this new shop. So like I'm testing new welders, but they were just down the street 2 weeks ago. So like everybody kind of knows everyone in this industry. So be very careful, because you might need a letter of recommendation. You might have to call somebody up and get a job or a lead on something, or call somebody up for different, to be a resource. Be like, I run into problems all the time that I just don't know. And because the networking that I've done in this industry, I know exactly who to call when I run into various situations. Like if I run into an issue with D11, I can call up my buddy Daryl Peterson. If I run into an issue with ASME Section 9, I can call up my buddy Scott Wachowski. If I run into an issue with like pulse waveforms, I can call Padraic Bean. Like these are all the people that I've met along my journey that I think they're just as big of a weld dork as I am.
Yeah. And that's been honestly something super helpful for me. And like, I always had welders and everything like that. And the workforce, I'm like, West Michigan manufacturing, like it's a small world. I have no idea how many welders, come in, they bring their resume, and I'm like, yep, I know people that you worked with at this company, your past 2-3 weld jobs, or we have people working here that worked there. And amongst welders, and even just networking with people like different, reps that we have for wire or shielding gas, know so many people around the area, and just the amount of networking and connections that are there that you might not realize. Like where I went to Voc in high school, there were people at my employer that also went to Voc there, one the same time I did. There were some that were there, 5, 10, 15 years before I was there. My instructor there actually works for another ISD, and I ended up networking with him a lot, and we're on the same advisory board for the local community college. So we have started running into each other, doing different welding competitions and stuff like that together. And, things that you never really think of in the moment, but you run into a lot of people in a lot of different places. And
yeah, you start seeing a lot of the same faces at different events.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool though, because I think this like our generation, we're more willing to give back than the previous generation. We want to see other people succeed. We want to put a hand out and bring a welder up instead of, put up a roadblock and prevent somebody from taking that next step. So I think that's really cool that, you kind of getting actively involved. Like you're working as a welding engineer, you could probably take the night off, but no, you're hanging out at the local Votech college as an adjunct, like teaching these young welders stuff that, you're experiencing every day in your line of industry, stuff that, helping them avoid some of the pitfalls that you probably encountered when you were going through school, when you were, working on your engineering degree, to be able to give back to the new generation that's currently coming up through the ranks.
Yeah, that's really a huge thing, just with, I guess, a gap in industry. There was a long time where, everyone was really pushing people to go to college and that, you had to have a degree to be successful. And there was really just this gap where not a lot of people were getting into skilled trades. And I really think with the growth in this industry and the push for growth in this industry, like there's so many grants available for training funding and all this different stuff that we were, like at my previous job, we were able to get access to grant funding to help with training and development and purchasing equipment and materials. And there are so many really great resources out there to be able to help you do that. Because I think we're all kind of feeling the growing pains of the industry that, it seems like there's never enough welders and never enough people that have the skills that are needed in this field. And I always tell people, I'm like, never forget what it's like to be a new person, because, there was a day, you could have been at a shop for 20 years, but there was a day when you walked in there and you didn't know anything. You didn't know what was going on. Like, you needed help, and don't be afraid to give that to other people, because you're only as good as the people you have working around you and the team that you're building. And that's a huge thing that I always reinforce, with students and trainees at work, that, building that team and having those resources like that just helps everybody be better. It helps everyone do better overall, be more productive, know what's going on, and just work as a better team.
Yeah, I was talking to Andrew Brown a while ago, and he was talking about 50% of the skilled workforce is leaving. Like, when you break it down to that, within the next 10 years, when you break it down to 50 percentages, it's like mind blowing. And we had an AWS section meeting last night, and one of the folks that came in as a visitor or guest to the event, we were talking about CWIs, senior CWIs, and certified welding engineers. There's 28,000 CWIs nationally. 26,000 are internationally. 26,000 nationally, and there's only like 800 senior CWIs. And there's 80 certified welding engineers. 80. Yeah. I mean, you think about that. These are the people that need to tell us exactly, here's how this needs to be done, so that, this stuff's going to stay together. Because when we stick metal together, we need it to hold. There's 80 worldwide that are, certified welding engineers. I guess that's through AWS. But, that's a very small number when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, just the amount of welding even that's in my local area. I could drive an hour in every direction and probably find 50 or 100 different manufacturing companies. And really, I would think that there would be a lot more of those. I know the certified welding engineer, I know I've looked into that, and I started with my CWI and CWE. So I got those 3 years ago, when I got right out of college, because that was a goal that I had that I wanted to get. And those are things I've kind of been working towards. I just got, I just did the training stuff to take the test, but my procedure qualification endorsement. So those are always things that I'm seeking to gain, and skills that, again, I want to kind of add to my wheelhouse and what I know, and just being able to add to that.
So that's the WPQR2. Well, I think they changed it now. So you're going for the procedure one.
Yep. Procedure qualification.
How is that? Because I did the performance qualification, so I got the endorsement to be able to certify and test welders. How is it for the procedure?
It was a really good training, really informative. I came from a background where I was developing weld procedures, both, for our welders, for robotics, for spot welders. So I had a lot of that procedure development training already, but filling out the paperwork, for somebody who might have a welding background and hasn't really gone through using different code books and filling out PQRs and WPSs and getting that understanding of how to do those, it was incredibly helpful. And, I've been doing it for years, and I still have things that I learned in that training. And I did the online one that was, 16 hours over the course of 4 days. But even doing that was really, really helpful. And I've been using, D11, D1.3. I've been using those code books for the past 3 years and even using them a little bit in college. So very, very helpful to get a little more knowledge on that, because I spent most of my time qualifying welders to procedures that we'd already built. But really just the biggest takeaway, I guess, that I got from that was really just having all your paperwork in an order and the do's and don'ts. And gentleman that did the training, he's been in the industry for, I think he said 30, 35 years. And he's had, jobs all over the place qualifying to different, pressure vessel codes and structural codes and sheet metal codes and all sorts of specialty alloys. So he's a really, really good resource to be able to ask these questions of and be able to hear all this information. Because even in, the few different jobs that I've had since I've been in industry, I still have a very limited scope of experience. I mean, I say that in comparison to a lot of people. I have a little bit of fabrication, a little bit of production, a little bit of advanced automation with automotive, and, have that good variety of a background. But it just amazes me all the different things that, he'd accomplished in his career. And then again, he's spending time doing these trainings through the AWS, helping to educate people in this, and really, really helpful in my opinion.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So what do you know which books that because you said you haven't taken the exam yet, right?
Yep. It is on the B2.1, pre-qualified weld procedures, and then D1.1. So it's, I believe, one test that is either 2 or 4 hours long, but one test, so a lot less than what I had to do for my CWI.
Right.
But one test that you go and do and then get that qualification. But there's, I believe, stuff that you get from both of those tests, or both of those code books. Okay, yeah,
B2. That's B2.1. My buddy Charlie Cross is on that, I guess, that code committee, and he said it's like the best kept secret in the industry. And it's a great freaking book. So I actually had a client that we submitted some WPSs that were written off B2.1, and I guess the client was like, "Oh yeah, we don't want to use B2.1 because whatever," and I had to write them a statement like all of these WPSs are based off of SWPSs that were written and tested to AWS B2.1, because it's an SWPS. That's where the information is. When you get it, it starts off with B2.1. So why would you not want to use that code book? It gives you a lot more leniency, and it covers everything. So instead of certifying to AWS D1.3, like it opens up, it gives you a little bit more wiggle room, and everything's already pre-qualified. Why would you not want to use that?
Yeah, and that was a tool that I really hadn't utilized all that much, because we had, different code books that we use and customers reference like those specific code books. But you can also, take something that's already developed. You might be qualifying the exact same stuff in D1.1 or D1.3, not realize that it's already been qualified, where you have all these things, set up for you. And it's as simple as asking a customer, like, hey, we have procedures that are qualified to this. They're pre-qualified. We still went through and did our testing, but being able to use those, like, we really didn't utilize those. And the amount of work and time that would have saved, yes. Developing coupons, dialing in parameters, doing all the cut and etch and all the destruct testing, and doing all the upfront work when it, gives you joint detail designs that, if you're within this tolerance, and gives you, one test where it covers a lot more, where like specific codes are good for, specific things, but you're a lot more limited in that window. And, the amount of work that removes is something that I wish I would have known about a lot sooner, because, I'd heard of them, but we always did a lot of like qualification for parts. So you have a very specific weld joint, sometimes it's different material thicknesses that you're welding together, or just non-standard joint types. So it was a lot of development. We would either make coupons that match those joint types or do development on the part. It just really depended what we were qualifying and then who it was for. But yeah, having that and being able to use that is extremely helpful.
Yeah, I had a client, and they're like, "Hey, we need to develop welding procedures for this code, this code, this code, and for all of our guys for this project that we're working on." And I was like, "Well, how about I save you thousands of dollars, and you just pay like $250. You download the SWPS, and then we rewrite the WPSs based off of that. And then you own that. Instead of, going through the monotony of coming to the shop, getting the coupons, testing the welders, sending them off, having them do cut, like you said, cuts, etches, x-rays, tensile pulls, Sharpie V-notch, like all this stuff. What if I told you it was already done for you, and it's, to code, and you can pay like $250. You can download it right now, and I can write you a WPS in like 15 minutes based off of your application and that document. And they're like, what? Yeah, it's already did. It's already done.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the reaction I had, in that training, because again, I'd heard of them, but just sitting there and actually going through that code and realizing all the things that are actually covered in there, I'm like, wow, this is something that more people need to know about, more people need to utilize, because I don't know how many times I've had people ask me, well, if I wanted to go through and qualify this joint, this material thickness, like what weld procedures would I need? Like what would the cost be, understanding all that. And that right there is a huge time and money saver, which in this industry are usually your two biggest things that you're going after when it comes to jobs and doing stuff efficiently and as productively as you can.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're going to have to let me know how that test goes, because I'm very interested. Like I said, I did WPQ1. I'm looking at doing my WPQ2. I've got my district director was telling me last night, he's like, you need to take your senior CWI. I think you're smart enough to do it. And I was like, why would I want to do that? I don't know that I need to be a senior CWI, because I don't see the value. Like I've already got my CWI, and if I get that WPQ2, it's pretty much the same thing as a senior CWI, if I'm not mistaken, because I think the senior CWI is more on WPSs, PQRs, WPQRTs. It's all more of the paperwork side of things, which I've got that. I just need to get that other endorsement, and I think I'd be good with that. So you're gonna have to let me know how that test goes, because I heard the beta version was like extremely difficult. So I don't know how the final testing version came out, but I know some people that took the beta version and they were not happy with the results, and they're super smart people.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how that one goes, because, I went through all the CWI testing, and I was nervous about that, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a horrible time. I get to go sit in front of a computer, because, of course, I scheduled 2 of the 3 tests, one right after the other at a Prometric facility, and it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, but definitely took some adjusting and getting used to. But I think a great resource for those, like going through the training programs, those are literally developed to, one, give you a base level of knowledge, because any training you're going to get on a code book, it's going to give you enough information to be dangerous. And then you need to take what you know to determine, procedures, positions, go through and read the code and read all your footnotes and understand, what is and isn't covered under that code, and really like helping you determine that information. But all those training seminars, like I did a 2-week seminar for my CWI at Hobart, and the whole first week it was just review of processes and all the fundamental information. But there were people in that course. One was a welder from a pipeline who wanted to grow in his career and become a CWI. There was a quality engineer there who really didn't have much of a welding background. So those are really built to take anybody, from an advanced welding knowledge to base level knowledge, and give you the skills you need to get that endorsement and to be able to pass those tests and really get that understanding. And that was super, super helpful.
Yeah. Now, do you think having a background in welding, like as a hands-on welder, helped you through the CWI exam?
Oh, yeah. I think that was a huge part of it, like that, and the engineering background that I had and training of welders, like that made it so much easier, because, I'd kind of dabbled in all these things before. So I had, again, that base knowledge, and then going through that training really helped me, know how to answer those test questions. Because the big thing with codes, it's going to give you some stuff that's really cut and dry, and then there's some stuff that's open to interpretation. You need to be able to read a note about undercut or porosity and know how your joint's loaded and what you're allowed. If there's 4 different exceptions to that, you could run 4 different code books and have 4 completely different requirements for what's acceptable for undercut or different defects, and being able to determine that, but also, knowing what undercut is, knowing what porosity is, knowing what causes it. And that was huge, not only in like my welding background, but in engineering, being able to troubleshoot and remove those. But that makes a world of difference when you're going to qualify welders and you're teaching people, because if you haven't done that, it's a lot harder to, explain what somebody needs to do. You can research stuff online, but who knows what you're going to find. But having that experience and time in a booth, like, makes a world of difference, because you're not just going in there and telling somebody, well, that's not good. You're telling them how it can be better and why that's happening, and giving them those skills. Because that was a huge part of me, like, having a job as a welder while I was going through school for engineering. Because I'm like, I've worked with engineers that didn't have that background, that don't know what it's like to be on the floor, that design something you can't even fit the nozzle of your welder inside of. So they're telling you to put a weld where you can't even reach.
How am I supposed to get access into that?
Yeah. And being able to have those skills and understanding what that's like, and then going through the knowledge and kind of learning the background behind, all of those decisions, like, it made a world of a difference for me.
Yeah. Now, do you think having your CWI and your welding engineering degree, do you think both of those endorsements and that, the certificates you've got from that has made you a better welder? Because you still do hands-on welding, right?
Yeah. I think that's played into it quite a bit. I mean, being able to, again, I just started as a welder. Like, one of my first welding job, we had like little Sharpie marks on the welders where, for this material thickness, you turn your welder to the red marks, and this material thickness, you go to the blue marks. And I'd get a cut list in the morning on a napkin while we're all sitting around having our morning coffee, and then, go out and cut my steel, go shear steel. We would form and insulate oven panels, assemble those structural frame that we were putting those into, form up our headers, and do all these different things. And like, I knew I had the basics of putting stuff together and learn the fabrication side of things. But then, my next job, we had mostly like round stock components or square stock and little like clips, because we made racks for powder coating and e-coating. But there, I went in for my weld test. They had 2 coupons, and the guy, does 4 tacks, a 2-inch long weld, and 2 more tacks. And he's like, okay, recreate this. So, that was my weld test. Like, my first job, my weld test, they just pulled some stuff out of scrap bin, and they're like, just weld some stuff together. Like, we just want to see what you can do. And then going to somewhere, they didn't have prints on the floor. They didn't do any of that. You had a welded part, and the welds were painted on it, and you just had to make more versions of that. And being able to get into like fixture development there was really good. But having that understanding and kind of going through those jobs, because even, till I was over halfway through with college, I didn't get a lot of that weld symbol background. Blueprint reading, I dealt with, fabricating ovens, but I didn't get a lot of weld symbol experience in the field. I didn't get a ton of blueprint experience and really working with a lot of those different things. Like, my first job, we used tape measures, and that was about as advanced of measuring equipment as we used. And then going to a shop, where we really, like, you were just welding a part that was already welded. Our jig and fixture department would fabricate a part off of the print and the weld symbol, and then build a jig around it. And that's what production welders used. But I was also able to like work my way up to doing that and be able to use the skills that I was learning in school and apply that hands-on. And it definitely made it a lot easier when it came to getting my CWI and being able to train people successfully and understanding, the different experiences that everybody gets in different jobs and different career paths. Because even being, working as a fabricator, we'd get our cut list, and then we just knew, you needed male, female panels. These are the thickness that you need, the type of insulation. Like we did that one product, so we just knew, you get your dimensions of an oven panel, and then you could go make all the components that you needed for that, and you just know that. But
yeah, I'm glad you brought up welding symbols. That seems to be an area that a lot of, I don't want to say welding engineers, because I would assume most welding engineers understand welding symbols and they can write them accordingly. But a lot of engineers out there have no clue what they're doing when it comes to welding symbols, and they just drag and drop stuff from, whatever palette in the drawing software. They're just dragging shit over. And I was like, this stuff doesn't make, like, if you know how to read welding symbols, you're looking at it, you're like, this does not make any sense whatsoever.
yeah, that's definitely something I've seen a lot. Like I'm sure every welder has and every welder's dealt with. Very often I find that welders have more experience and more training with weld symbols than, engineers that have that. And even in college, when I was first learning weld symbols, I was like, holy cow, like this is a lot to learn. And, what's going on here? Had to take some time to sit down and really work on it. Hobart actually makes really, really good training packets on that. They will literally walk you through from what a reference line is all the way to every weld symbol, to all the details that you could have noted on a groove weld symbol. And this packet walks you like step by step through everything. So we used to use that as a training tool because you could give it to somebody who's never welded, and, they sit and work on a packet for 6 hours. You have a conversation with them while they're going through it and explain it. They're able to read weld symbols, better than some engineers that I've worked with that have been making these drawings and making these prints. I'm like, when a welder looks at it, this is exactly what they're going to do. And if I can look at a print and I have questions, our welders could be welding it 5 different ways.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. The Typhoons are out now, and the 230 amp version is on sale for $27.49. That's a $1,000 savings on this all-new TIG welding machine. There's also a 330 amp version as well. The all-new Typhoon features a 7-inch high-def colored screen, split waveform control for AC, industry-first waveforms, and a 3 amp start on AC. You can order yours today at everlastwelders.com, and be sure to use Arc Junkies in the comment section at checkout to get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch upgrade when you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. We're also brought to you by Strong Hand Tools, the tools that save you time, improve your quality, and increase your comfort. These are the tools I trust to run my side business for repairs and fabrication. Head on over to stronghandtools.com/promo and save big on tables and fixturing tools during their summer specials, including 5% off mobile workstations, 15% off slotted tool tables, and 5% off 5/8 toolkits. Stop fighting your work and increase your productivity and quality with Strong Hand Tools. Now let's get back to the show. Yeah, that's the problem is because like as a welder, you're looking at the print and you're like, this doesn't make sense. I know how to read welding symbols, but this thing just isn't jiving. But the engineer, they're smarter than me because they went to school and they have a piece of paper that says that they're smarter than me. So I've got to be wrong. No, you're not. The engineer just has no idea what the hell they're doing. They're dragging and dropping shit, and it's amusing, but it's not. I mean, it's kind of sad. Like you would think most of these engineers would know the appropriate welding symbol for what they're trying to do, and it's just not the case. But I like the fact that you said that you're giving those packets to your welders, so then they can understand. Like, okay, yeah, this is wrong. I need to do like an RFI on this. Because I did the same thing. Like I went through real educational instead of doing Hobart, and like they did an awesome presentation on welding symbols. But that's an area that like I was already proficient in because it was an area that I was already teaching at the school. So when it came to Part A, I think it's like 20 or 30% of that exam is based off of welding symbols. So having a good fundamental understanding of welding symbols really helps out with that exam. One thing I recommend to a lot of people is there's what is it? The Spark Notes? I think it's Spark Notes. You can buy that off Amazon for like $12. And it's like a trifold front and back, and it's all the different welding symbols, all the information. Like you said, here's the reference line, here's the arrow, here's, the tail of the symbol, here's all the stuff that could be in the tail, here's all the stuff that could be on the reference line when it comes to groove welds, fillet welds, here's arrow side, here's other side, here's all the different weld symbols and welding symbols all on one sheet. I used to have that in my gang box because we'd get different prints, and I'd go over there like, I don't recognize this. I haven't worked with this yet. I'd go over there and grab that little quick notes and pull it out of the gang box, and it's all laminated. I'm like, okay, here, this is exactly what I need to do. And you kind of you just break it down Barney style.
Yeah, and stuff like that is incredibly helpful. Like coming from a contract manufacturing company, we had, I think at one point I did the math in between our hand weld and robot welding and spot welding. We had like 2,500 different customers. And even in those customers, you might have two different divisions that do two completely different things. We actually had an engineering team that would convert everything to our own print standard. But even then, a lot of that was kind of copy paste and giving like welders the ability to know when to ask questions. So look at a print and be like, I have questions about how I could weld this or how I should weld this. And if you ever look at a print and you have a question that's not a proper print, but also as a welder, you get told your blueprints, your Bible, you do what's in there, and there ends up being a problem later. Well, that's not your fault because you welded it how you're supposed to. But having those tools and actually understanding weld symbols, because even until I had to start like training people on it, that's really when it kind of, I guess, fully clicked for me. Because I could read prints, I could read symbols, but again, that just kind of helps further your understanding that much more. Two different people could look at a print and think two different things about what they're looking at. So being able to kind of cover your bases with that. And it's also really hard in like a 15-week welding course, like my basic welding. I have like one lecture that I do on weld symbols, but I tell them where they can go and where they can find these resources that are going to help them learn, print reading and weld symbols. Because most of what they're going to be doing is, maintenance. They're going to be welding, doing weld repairs on things, or there's a lot of tool and die students that are going to basically just be doing repairs. So I always try to cater it based on, what somebody knows, what they are going to be using this class for, just to have them get the most out of it. Because, in maintenance, you're not really going to need to be able to read weld symbols, but you're going to need to know what material you're welding, how to set your welder, what things you need to be concerned with depending on, where you're welding or how that changes based on welding position, and just get exposure to as much stuff as possible.
Yeah, that's another big thing, is understanding settings. I mean, you mentioned that earlier, understanding what volts actually do, what wire feed speed does, how important travel speed actually is, what materials need to be pre and post weld heat treated, inspection times on different types of alloys. There's so much to it. Like I said earlier, that's what sucked me into welding. Like there's just so much to learn about this stuff. But settings, the variables, that's huge. One thing I always recommend to people is getting a copy of, whatever filler metal you're using. That company develops literature, kind of like a sales catalog, but it has all their consumables in there, and it recommends to you the exact wire feed speed and voltage and amperage and everything that you need, travel speed, everything that you need to know. I've built WPSs right off of the manufacturer's spec sheets because that's what the manufacturer recommends. So you can build a pre-qualified WPS right off that. So if you're out there, in a welding shop, regardless of what filler metal you're using, reach out to that company and say, hey, I need a copy of your consumables book, whether it's, Lincoln or ESOB or Hobart or whoever. And that's going to get you dialed in because, like you said, a lot of times with weld repairs, you're not dealing with symbols and you're not dealing with blueprints. You're cutting a weld out and you're making a repair. Well, where do I set my machine for this? Well, I know that roughly, I need about 1 amp for every thousandths of material thickness, and here's the depth of the weld. I can open up my consumables book and say, okay, I'm running 045 wire. Here's, about the amps that I'm looking for. Okay, I can go over here and set my machine. So that I'm not twisting the knob to get within that paint marker area. You develop a deeper understanding of this stuff, and it's free resources that most people don't know about. Well, yeah,
even your codes are referencing to be within manufacturer settings.
Exactly.
And again, just knowing where to look for stuff is probably the biggest thing and the most helpful tool that you can have, because those are out there. There's apps you can download on your phone that will tell you, based on your process and your wire diameter and your gas type and your material thickness and position, here's your recommended settings. And even if they might not be exactly perfect for what you're doing, they get you pretty close. And using your filler metal specifications like that, that is a huge help for just knowing where to start. Because I feel like that's half the battle with people learning how to weld most of the time, is just knowing where to start and kind of how to tackle what problem they have in front of them, or tackle the repair that they have in front of them, is just knowing that starting point. And kind of, sometimes you might not even know what material you're welding, and you have to go in and do a spark test, or be able to understand enough about different materials to know what you're working with, to know how you need to weld it. Like, I don't know how many companies have 5-6 different welders set up with different wire diameters, different welding processes, and being able to know what works best for, certain things, or knowing what you're looking at, what the best thing is going to be for you to use. And then if it's not something familiar with, well, where do you go for that?
Mm-hmm. Now, at your company now, do most of your welders work off of WPSs, or are they working off of, like, I know this is going to work because, like, I'm a well-trained welder. I mean, there's a lot of places that operate like that, but are your welders working off WPSs and everything for the work that they're performing?
So currently I just started my new job like 2 weeks ago. So getting back into automotive. So we just do setup work instructions, and then basically everything is qualified through cut and etch, but we have, settings set in there and all this stuff set up where we're just validating it with cut and etch. Where I was at previously, it was all to code standards. So we were going through doing the WPSs, qualifying the welders to the WPSs, going through and, again, still doing that destruct, but meeting those coupon size requirements and running in those process windows, which a lot of the time you're getting that window, you might be qualifying people in different ways if you're not necessarily referencing a code, and you're referencing, a customer's weld specification, and they just might require that it passes cut and etch. Or we've, previously done work for customers that required us to send welds out for third-party validation. We had to get hardness testing done. We had to do, 3 different cut and etches and 3 sections and a 1-inch long weld because of the different specifications they were referencing. And then, the same customer, a different division, they're just like, fully weld everything, like, use a WPS. We know you already have them created. You're good to go. And then some people are requiring proof that our welders are qualified, looking at all that paperwork. They want to see all of that back in their contract documentation before they're even going to approve production runs of anything.
Yeah. So do you guys primarily operate in D13, or just because you mentioned a lot of cut and etch? I know D13 is very big on that because it's all sheet metal code. Or are you guys running to, what's the other one for automotive, ICAR? Do you guys deal with ICAR at all?
I believe so. That I'm not entirely sure on. Still learning all that stuff, because
Right.
I was in automotive for my internship, but kind of getting back into that scope and that side of things. But I know we have a couple different specifications that we use, and then customer weld specs that we work off of. So
Okay. Now, do you guys primarily, are you like robot, cobot operations, or do you still have manual welding, or is it like kind of a mix of the two?
the only manual welding is repair welding, and working on basically eliminating that. It's really boiling back to a lot of advancing and improving our automation processes. So automotive has always kind of been a very heavily automated field, but being able to really hone in and develop those processes and improve them, and basically get to the point where we have this technology in place. So we're eliminating the need for that, and, adding material handling, making stuff easier on operators, and really just looking at optimizing stuff as much as possible. Because again, that's a challenge everyone's kind of been facing lately, just with the workforce being the way it is. It's somebody that's looking for employment's market right now. You could put your resume out there. Like, I got this job recently. I wasn't looking for work. Somebody just found me on LinkedIn, and, I've had that happen a lot. And, this time the stars just happened to align and it worked out for me. But
Yeah, LinkedIn's really good with that. I told my boss one day because he popped off and said something. I was working at the college, and LinkedIn used to send like these emails or whatever. Like people were looking at your profile, and so I threw it in his face because like he was constantly telling me, he's like, "You need to get on LinkedIn. You need to get on LinkedIn." And he said something about what we were doing or kind of critiqued my performance, and I said, "You better watch what you're talking about, buddy, because I don't know if you know this or not, but people are looking at my profile on LinkedIn." But I mean, it's true. There's a lot of people. I've received a lot of job offers through LinkedIn, and it's like, I'm not really interested, but I appreciate you reaching out. But I mean, that's the way that, a lot of these companies are reaching out to find people. They're not using a whole lot of Indeed, Monster, and all that stuff instead of, because they're not having a lot of great results posting a job opening, because all these people that aren't qualified are applying for it. So now, like a lot of these HR companies or HR divisions of companies, they're actively seeking out folks within that industry. They're like, oh, we're looking for a welder that's familiar with automation and this, that, and the other thing. Let's scroll through LinkedIn and we're just going to start checking people's profiles and we'll make them a job offer or, invite them to apply.
Yeah, LinkedIn's been a huge, huge resource because, over the years I've had job offers from all over the place and, most of them are out of state or bigger companies and stuff like that. But just having those connections and all those different people that are looking at your experience and what you have on there and seeing that, like I always encourage students and welders, I'm like, set that up for yourself because you're not always constantly looking for a job. Like you don't know what opportunities are out there. And if you're not that you're necessarily always looking, but if you're not open to the possibilities of what's out there, if you don't know you have an opportunity, you could miss out on something great for you. And that ability to develop those skills, like when I first got into welding, I remember getting out of Oak and, I got on my computer and I Googled, I was like, welding jobs near me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what's out there? Google shows something like an hour away from my house because that's a company, that paid $5 to have a Google ad or whatever they did. And I ended up, working an hour away from my house. There's companies 6 minutes down the road that don't have that, that presence out there. And it's a huge thing getting into marketing and just announcing like your presence, what you're capable of, not only as an employer, but as an employee, and just having that ability to network and connect with people. Because a big thing for me on LinkedIn's been networking with educators and kind of seeing best practices and what people are doing, because I have the industry experience and I'm still working in industry, but I'm also working as an instructor, and then kind of building that gap, being on advisory boards and stuff like that, being able to really get that input from the field and bring that back into education. But seeing the growth that's happened in welding education, in the past few years, that's been a huge thing for me, because I never got out of college and thought, just like I never thought I was going to go to college, and then I ended up getting my engineering degree. I got out of college. I never thought I was going to accept a job as a weld trainer and engineer. I thought I was just going to go be an engineer. And I knew I wanted to, be on the floor most of the time and be hands-on. Like I didn't want to sit behind a desk and just draw blueprints and do design work all day. Like I wanted to keep myself well-rounded. I ended up getting into training and I fell in love with it. But again, when I graduated college, or, if I look at my career, 5 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be where I am today. And if 5 years before that, I thought I was going to get a welding engineering degree and somebody told me that, I probably would have looked at them, told them they were crazy.
Right.
So just the development that kind of happens as you learn these skills and as you network, just knowing what the possibilities are, because this industry is so vast and there's so much you can get into. But again, if you don't know what's out there, you don't really get to see that.
Yeah. Now, what are some of the days or some of the ways that you're staying up to date on like current technology? Because as a CWI, you have to maintain certain continuity hours and PDHs and stuff. What are some of the ways that you're enhancing your training and staying up to date on current trends?
I always look at different seminars that are offered, different basically networking events. Not that I get to go to those as much as I would like, but just being aware of what's out there and even following people on LinkedIn or following different companies and manufacturers, you can see what they're posting. It's a wonderful age of technology where they're going to be out there promoting, what products they have. And even being on LinkedIn, I've had, salespeople reach out to me and say, hey, based on where you work and what we know that you do by looking at your company's background, because, we had a website and have all these things posted, we're able to network and have conversations about, you have a product that's something that can really help me out and something we could potentially use, looking at return on investments and figuring out if that's something that, you want to invest in. But being able to have that networking has been huge, and just looking online, different AWS forums, like there's so much information out there on development of the industry and process development, equipment development. Like it's just knowing where to look for it.
Yeah. Are you doing any seminars this year? Like, are you doing Fab Tech or anything?
Don't have Fab Tech scheduled. Usually I try to go when they come to Chicago, but
I was going to say it's happening. Yeah, I was going to say it's happening September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct up on me.
It has that effect. Well, next year it's going to be in Orlando, so that's going to be awesome. Like my area. Do you know about the IEC, the Inspection Expo conference for it's essentially for certified welding inspectors?
I actually don't know if I've heard of that.
It's Austin, Texas. It's November 8th through the 10th. So it's like a whole thing. It's seminars, conferences for inspectors. In the welding area.
Yeah. I'll definitely have to look into that because, I don't know if I've ever heard of that. I mean, it's never anything that I've looked at going to, so. Yeah,
I did Weld Summit last year, so I'm not doing the Weld Summit this year, but I'm doing the IEC conference, so that should be pretty cool. And then they're doing, what the heck is it, the Automation Conference. I think it's going to be Columbus, Ohio? Okay. Columbus or Cincinnati? I know it starts with a C, one of the two. It's up in Ohio, but the Automation Conference, I think that one's in October.
Okay. Yeah, I know the AWS puts on a lot of different events and networking events and seminars and stuff too, where you're able to go network, or, they have a conference on automation where they have a bunch of different speakers come together, and even like people that I went to school with, work for all these different manufacturers. So I also have them as a resource, like, if I just get an idea one day about something that might be helpful to me, I'm like, hey, what do you have for this? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely good, especially if your employer is cool with you going out and doing, continuing training and stuff like that. It's always good to attend a lot of the seminars, conferences. I mean, that's another opportunity to network with people in your area, more weld nerds, because you can never know too many. I mean, it's like having a Rolodex of information. You just have that ability to be able to, oh man, I'm running into this, I can't figure it out. Oh, I'll call so-and-so. I met them at the conference last year, or the seminar. So it's always a good thing to try to attend those and, keep expanding upon your knowledge, because you can't ever know everything in this industry. And like I said before, that's the cool part about welding is like, you're never going to know it all, but you can try. You just keep falling down the rabbit hole.
One thing that's always been super helpful with that, again, just the networking with people and being able to soak in all this information, but all the different avenues that you have out there, like having those resources with different people, different seminars, different groups, different companies, just it's a wealth of information, and you never really know everything. So knowing people that have those skills and have that knowledge, super, super helpful. And again, just not really the advertising that's out there, but being able to, scroll around online and find somebody that specializes, in XYZ. It takes, 5 minutes of scrolling through LinkedIn and you can go find a subject matter expert on anything. And most of these people are really, really willing to talk to you and to be able to share that information, or, how they got to where they are in their careers or the paths that they take. Like, that's always something I found very interesting talking to different welders and different engineers, like, how did you start in this industry and how did you get to where you are now? Like, I had an intern this summer, and prior to starting at Ferris, so we always worked with Ferris getting interns every summer because, again, we were really big on education and teaching, students these skills, letting them use their skills in the workforce, and also getting them exposure to the different possibilities that are out there, like going into the workforce. Like, we always encourage doing a sophomore year internship and a junior year. Like, the junior year internship was required by the college, but we're like, come work here before you actually have to do an internship. Like, come work here for the summer, get this experience. And I always told my interns, I'm like, get as much variety as you can. Like, try different companies. If you're interested in aerospace, go target an aerospace, manufacturer. If you're interested in automotive, go look for that and get that exposure to those different things. We did career fairs and stuff all the time. I would always go back up to Ferris, where I went to school, and, see some of my classmates there representing their companies, or see different companies that, I've interviewed before. And a lot of the networking that comes from that is super great. Like, I had an intern that, I'd seen at the past 3 career fairs before she was finally ready. Like, yep, I want to work for you guys. And we went through and did that process. But prior to her starting in the weld program, like, she just started at college and then jumped right into the weld program. Prior to that, she'd never picked up a welder, never touched a welder, never been around it. She just got accepted to Ferris and was like, this is the program that I want. So just jumping out on a limb, I've trained people that have come from healthcare, working as nurses, and just wanting that change of pace. People that have been in careers for 30 years or 20 years that are looking to get into manufacturing and taking all these skills and, finding companies that are willing to teach you, and, working with all these different connections that you have. Like, there's quite a few of my interns that have left, use me as a reference on their resume. And I think the past 2 interns that I've had have used me as references, and I've talked to their current employers and, gave them that good recommendation, that good reference, and just building connections with people, having them as resources, because I didn't even know, like, the company that I was working at before, they were a half an hour away from where I grew up. I didn't know about that company until one of my friends told me up at college, and, that's an hour in the other direction. I'm like, so there was this company that sounds like it has all the things that I want, like a half hour away from my house, and I never knew about it until I found them, at a career fair at college, and then talking to one of my other classmates about it. So,
yeah, networking is huge. I always I'm forever going to beat that drum. There's just so many opportunities, so many doors that can be opened through networking with folks in this industry. And like I said before, it's a big industry, but it's a small, tight-knit network.
Especially in school too. Like, I always tell students, I'm like, you're frustrated with what you're doing. I'm like, try switching it up, try something different, or talk to the people that are around you, because you're all learning to weld together. Like, you have all had the same problem at one point or another. And, odds are one of you has figured out how to fix it after doing weld 2 or 3 times and figuring that out. So talking to people around you and using those resources, like, it gets you so much farther ahead in the industry and lets you learn so much more. Like, I've talked to a bunch of different people about different, training options, or, their employer as a company, like what it would take to develop a training program and to justify taking somebody out of production that already knows the company and the parts, and being able to develop them into someone that's training and pull them out of production. But the justification that really comes from that, like having people that are learning how to weld together, or having people that know the job that are working with your new people, like learning together just makes that experience so much easier, and also just helps you have that wealth of information because you're sharing it with other people. You're troubleshooting, you're networking and coordinating on all these different things.
Yeah. That's why I like what, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Scott Ellsworth. He's kind of like on a mission to bring internships back to different companies. So skilling up your current workforce, like you already know you've got a good workforce, you got a good group of people. How do we get them skilled up? That's why I thought it was kind of neat with the company that you had, where you guys were actually offering in-house training. You kind of couple that up with an apprenticeship program. Everybody's kind of learning and growing together. And then when you bring in new employees, you got a roadmap. It's like, okay, if you want to get from point A to point B, here's how you do it. And these are the classes you need to attend. And, we might be able to link up with a local community college and do the training there, or we could do it here after hours. So I think those, networking, doing apprenticeship programs, skill building, especially with your peers. I mean, all that stuff that's like the keys to success in this industry.
Yeah, just the development that exists in all these different avenues. Like, I never thought getting into training that, I would build a whole training curriculum and be training people on a shop floor, having that weld engineering background and being able to give that to welders or people that have never picked up welders before and giving them that fundamental understanding. My boss there, she got her PhD in basically adult education, and in these like career technical vocational training programs, she actually started by talking to Grand Rapids Community College, which is where I also teach, but she started talking to them, and we, as far as I know, we're one of the first companies that did it. We were able to align our training curriculum closely enough with what they were teaching in those courses to where we can bring people into our company, train them on the job. They're running parts, they're learning the processes, they're getting training on blueprints and weld symbols, and they're able to never have to go to college. They're training in the workforce in a shop, and they were able to get college credit for that by doing prior learning assessments and basically providing proof to the school that all the things that they needed to do, they were accomplishing, that, they're being taught by somebody that has the credentials to teach at the college, because I was also already teaching at the college, but being able to develop that, like, I didn't even know that was possible until we tried it. And again, her having those connections, working with, she just moved jobs as well and is working at a local ISD as head of their adult education program. But being that involved in education and on all these advisory boards and really understanding that, like, that gives us the tools that we need to make welding education successful and to be able to take, this next generation and these up and coming welders. Because I remember when I got into the field and I was looking for a job, everyone's like, we want someone with 5 years of experience. And I'm like, well, I can't get that experience if I don't. Yeah, if I can't get a job, I can't get the experience. And even in the past few years, there's so many companies that are set up that they can help build you through that and help you develop that, or, hire you out of, a 15-week training program, or, somewhere where you're going there for 10 weeks, 40 hours a day and getting a certificate in welding. And yeah, it's just amazing all the stuff that's out there and all the opportunities that are there if you know where to look and you know who to talk to, and really pushing that envelope and knowing what's possible and what, things you're capable of, or, getting grant funding for training. That wasn't anything that I even knew existed until, I knew somebody that was pushing for that. We tried for it. We got it,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I mean, I think more companies need to do that. And I've said it 100 times on the podcast before. Like, everybody wants to complain that, I can't find welders, I can't find, people to do the work. Go to your local tech school, link up with them, volunteer your time, money, and resources. It's going to pay dividends. You're going to develop a pipeline of a bunch of students that, they want to get involved in welding. And if you're there helping everything out, you're creating a pipeline of employment for your company. But nobody wants to do that. They'd rather sit back and complain, this generation sucks, nobody wants to work, can't find any good help. Go help create the good help that you're looking for. Go down there. Serve on an advisory committee. let people do a plant tour in your facility. Go down there, work with the local community college, donate material, donate your time, send your welding supervisor, if they know what they're doing, donate, a couple hours, here and there throughout the month for your welding supervisor to go down there and show some, here's how we do it where I'm at. This is the gas metal arc welding process, and this is the type of material we work with. Have them go down there and do some demos, get people interested, and, stand back and watch that whole thing flourish. And then the welder shortage that you're experiencing is going to go away.
The big thing I've ran into is that's definitely, from a company's perspective, it's an investment of time and money, but also looking at the perspective of getting turnover or not getting qualified people, you're really throwing your money away if you're not spending the time to invest in things like that, because it's really not that costly to be able to do that. You could go there for an open house or go to career fairs. You sign up for a couple hours, you could talk to 50 different students. Like when I was in school at Ferris, our program coordinator always networked with a lot of people in industry. They would literally send him an email or send the program secretary an email. She would send it out to every student in the program of, hey, these are all the companies that are hiring. Here's the opportunity, and pushing that out to students. But as employers, I think a lot of companies fail to realize just what they can do to get involved in creating their own workforce. It sounds like a huge investment, and everyone looks at, the workforce is this big, huge problem. Well, we have the tools to create these solutions that really aren't that hard. It's hard right away to justify, that initial contribution to it, or even developing a training program, but it puts you miles ahead. Where, at a company, we had 5 full-time trainers, 5 full-time team members that didn't run any production, that, were there to train and develop people, that were there to, help keep equipment running, or, speed up processes, just troubleshooting stuff on the floor. But we were really easily able, it was a very big change, but very easily able to justify taking those resources to be able to invest it back into the company. Because if you have somebody coming in that, knows how to weld, but they don't know how to weld the 50 different products that somebody might see in a couple month time frame, you might get a welder that's 20 or 50% of what they could be. You take one person that, is 100% operator, half of their time is spent working with those people, you still end up better off because both of those people are more productive, which makes your whole company more productive.
Yeah.
And it is an investment, but that's exactly how you have to look at it. It doesn't just come overnight. As an industry, we need to work towards this change and work towards developing these things, because it's a lot of work in the beginning, but then it's easy, and you get so much of a return on your investment on that I don't understand why everyone's not doing it.
Yeah. I mean, the average onboarding cost for a 90-day probationary period to bring one person on is about $10,000. How much is it to send somebody to the school for a couple hours a day, or, once a week or twice a month? Send them down there for 3-4 hours, and you're paying somebody's hourly wage, and they're training 10, 15 students at a time. And then you're inspiring them to oh man, I want to go work with that company because so-and-so comes out here a couple times a month, and it sounds like that job's really cool. I want to go and apply there. Well, now your turnover rate's a lot less because you've got somebody that's actually interested in working for that company, and they kind of had a good idea of what's going on at that facility.
Yeah, and pushing the development of people is huge too, because I've never, as a welder, as an engineer, I've never looked at a company and, not wondered about where I could go from there. I didn't just want to get into a job and just do that. What growth do you have? What potential do you have for me to expand myself? Whether, as a company, you're going to send me out to get my CWI, or you're going to send me to different equipment manufacturers to get these trainings, or let me go to networking events, or, just get me exposure to different things that I haven't had before. And being able to offer that as a company is huge, because you're not just bringing people as an operator that, pushes a button or just MIG welds this one little bracket onto a part and that's all they do every day for the rest of their life. Like, nobody wants to do that. So being able to take people and let them learn different skills and give them challenges and diversify what they know and what they do, that is super, super helpful. Because if you get people doing the same thing day in and day out and there's no room for them to learn and grow, then, there's no excitement in that. Some people are fine coming in and doing the same thing every day, but a lot of people want that challenge, and they want to do something
for those
different.
that aren't, they need that challenge. They need that room, that opportunity for growth, that, change things up. Let me continue to grow. I don't want to be that same button pusher or, trigger puller. Like, give me room and opportunity.
Yeah, and that's a huge selling point as an employer too, saying we have this as an opportunity if you want it. Like with getting college credit through the training program, like there was a couple little add-ons that we had to do, like adding in flux core, adding in vertical uptig, and these minor things from what we already had set up. But we offered that to people. It's no cost to you if you want to do it. All you have to do, apply as a student. We handled the rest of the paperwork aside from a couple forms, but we weren't making everyone go through that. You get some people that have been in the industry for 20 years. They're like, I don't need college credit for anything. Like, I have the experience. But being able to offer those different avenues is huge, because offering people those skills, and again, you're spending a little bit of money, but they're bringing that back into your company and they're bringing that back into your business. And that's knowledge that you didn't have in your building before. That's access to different tools and different, processes that you didn't have the ability to utilize before. And you're, again, spending that little bit of money, but it pays itself back tenfold.
Yeah. And I mean, people just got to start putting money where their mouth is. Everybody wants to complain about it, but nobody really wants to do anything about it. So I'm glad that the companies that you've been working for, or the one that you're working for now, they're willing to make that investment and kind of disrupt the industry and do something a little bit different and say, hey, like, we're going to volunteer our time. We're going to bring people in. We're going to encourage them to grow and, take on new challenges.
Yeah. And even being involved in that, like, that's what really sparked my passion for education and for, teaching and helping develop this industry, because, I love my career and I loved welding and I loved learning welding engineering and loved being a weld engineer. But again, not knowing where my career could take me and all the things that I've been able to learn. And, there are so many companies out there that are willing to, pay for schooling or pay for you to go to trade school and just learn a skilled trade where, you might not be getting a college degree, but you're getting a certificate of completion. And again, just knowing that those things are out there, like, I see people post on Facebook or, LinkedIn all the time. They're like, I've never welded before. Where do I start? And, so many different people are providing you that information. Like, here's a company, here's a school, there's plenty of places, even like scholarships and stuff that you can get as somebody who just wants to learn how to weld. Like Metallica does a scholarship. Like, we teach those students at my community college, and they will literally pay for you to come learn how to weld, but you have to put yourself out there and you have to apply for that.
Yeah. The All Within My Hands Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great organization.
Yeah. But yeah, stuff like that. It's just so cool to see all the different things that are out there. But again, until you really explore the industry and get those contacts and network with different people, or as a company decide that you really need to do something different at the end of the day to fix your own problems, because we can all sit here and look at this as an issue, but if we're not doing anything about it, we're part of the problem too. So
Exactly.
Really reframing that mindset and, being proactive about this stuff instead of reactive, and creating the change that we need in this industry.
Yeah, you got to be the change you want to see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. Sarah, why don't you tell everybody before we get out of here where they can find you if they want to network with you? I know you're all over LinkedIn and stuff, but if you got other social medias you want to go ahead and plug, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I mean, really, LinkedIn's my only professional resource that I currently use, but I do a lot of networking on there. that's pretty much the best way to get a hold of me or to network me. And, I'm always open to talking to people and just seeing what's out there and having those conversations and being able to be a resource to help people develop training or, what it's like being a CWI, and having these conversations is something that I really enjoy.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to kind of educate the listeners on your career path as a welder and a welding engineer.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, anytime. My pleasure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation between Sara and I. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite downloader app so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show and you got a few seconds, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps me out. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.